Well, welcome to the Writer's Block. I am so pleased to have Benjamin Vrbicek. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it.
Oh,
Well done.
awesome. From Gospel-Centered Discipleship here with us today. And we were talking a little bit before we hit record, just that this is a very friendly group of people, writers here who really understand the message that you have written about in your book called Blogging for God's Glory in a Clickbait World. So that's just an awesome book title. It's an awesome book. I read it. Um,
Mm.
so anyway, we're excited to talk to you and have you here on the Writer's Block. So welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you and what you do and what you do with writing.
Yeah. So, dad and husband and bunch of kids, all the way from 7 to 18. So I've kind of touching a few different kinds of bases there of like college decisions from and like just little league sports. Um, and I've been a local church pastor for 15 years or so, and before that was an engineer, which was kind of a weird shift to then move to a writer. But that's what the Lord did. I used to hate it. I hated it. But the Lord has changed a lot of that. So, and then I don't know if people will see this, but I'm in the church cafe, and so a local church pastor here in Pennsylvania for the last 11 years. And for me, writing so we wrote the blogging book together with my friend John, but as a lot of what my writing has been, it's grown a little bit or shifted, and where that happens mostly now, the words and where they get published or not published. But yeah, I just fell in love with writing and blogging, and so that's a little bit about me. And then Gospel-Centered Discipleship. I've been a part of them. I don't know if people know much about it. It's in some ways like a little gospel coalition. In some ways like it's a little like Desiring God, in that Jonathan Dodson was a pastor who wrote a book called Gospel-Centered Discipleship. So that's in the way like Desiring God, which is more well known, John Piper. But like the Gospel Coalition, that it's drawing from a lot of different authors. And so anyway, I've been working for them for the last 4 years, um, and but got connected with them doing their book work. I did some freelance book design for them a few years ago, and so that's been a neat privilege. So I get to do a lot with words, whether they're on Sunday morning or during the week, writing blogs or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a cool story. So I found it interesting that you started professionally as an engineer and shifted into ministry and writing work.
Yeah.
So did you just, I mean, did you know you wanted to be a writer? Did you have this gifting with writing, or did you just kind of like, this is not the right fit for me. I'm going to do something totally different.
It's not the first part that you described it there. You know, I've listened to Jared Wilson on podcasts. He's a hero friend guy. I like an author I like. So, but he talks about, packaging a book together and publishing it, making it like, as a third grader or something, and putting a fake copyright. I didn't do any of that. Like I didn't, my mom read me Where the Wild Things Are, I'm sure, like a
Yeah.
lot of us. But I didn't want to ever make one of those myself. So I chose reading or engineering partly because I was good at math and science. I hated to read and write. My dad was an engineer, so like it's like, oh, maybe I'll just, this will be the way to never write a paper. And so, and it kind of was. You wrote a few papers. They were very small and had equations in them. So that was for me a way to play to strengths and avoid weaknesses. But I think as the Lord got a hold of my life in college, I became a Christian and saw the beauty in Jesus, and life changed in a whole bunch of ways. And I was so far into the college degree, I finished those mechanical and aerospace engineering. I did it and worked in construction for 6 years after that, but did that while I was going to seminary. But in that time from college, becoming a Christian and reading the Bible, and then certainly in seminary, I realized like, oh wow, Christians not only read the book, like they read a lot of books, and then I guess people write them. Anyway, I was with all these liberal arts students who were just thriving. They thought, oh, books and reading, I can do that. And I was not. I was drowning. But anyway, all that to say, when I came out of seminary, I was like, wow, I think I really love words, and like the word, but just words that people write and read, and what they do to others, and shaping them and encouraging them and challenging them. And so that was kind of my story of becoming a writer.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And often, like the math and numbers, sciencey minded people don't always translate well into the written word kind of people, but clearly the Lord's gifted you in both. So
Well, Well, I
That's
appreciate you say that. I remember applying for a job as a pastor, and they were like, to be an engineer was not a highlight for that. They thought I was very impersonable. He will be a nerd and sit in his office and will never talk to people. So anyway, I'm not making fun. I was one. I absolutely was an engineer. So I'm not. I don't know if any ladies here on the call are engineers, but yeah,
looking
it is
for.
it has been a weird switch, but I love it, and I'm thankful for it. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. Well, we want to talk a little bit about your book, and a lot of us here in the Writer's Block are bloggers, and your
Mm,
book was written to bloggers specifically, and just kind of the struggle, but also the joy of writing and blogging. And so I'm curious, you talk about in your book just kind of how to align your motivations as a writer with the will of God, doing your writing for the glory of God. We talk about that a lot here on the Writer's
yeah.
Block. That's really what we're after. But I'd love to hear more about like how do you think about that as a writer yourself?
Mhm.
How do you line up your heart with God's heart?
Yeah. Um, Google Analytics usually isn't the tool to solve that. There are things that don't help that usually when you see how
Yeah.
few people are reading or whatever. So how do you do it? The thing I say we, John and I, who wrote the book, we tried to say probably blogging for God's glory could mean a lot of things, but just to make it simple, you were keen on one of them, to have a heart aligned with God's heart, and then to make best use of the craft of blogging or writing in general. And so to make use of those tools, but just to stay in that front half of aligning your heart. I don't know how you do it in 5 minutes. I don't know how you do it 5 months. These are lifelong pursuits. They're kind of, how do you become more sanctified questions, more
Mm,
than how do
yeah.
you become a better writer, um, merely. So I think it's almost easier to answer how to not do that. And I think would be go alone, never have friends, never be willing to receive feedback, never don't belong to a local church. I think if you were asking, how do I be a father? How do I be a mother? How do I be a single person that's aligned with God's heart? I think those are almost more similar questions to me than how do I be a blogger aligned with God's glory? I'd be curious, how would you answer that? How do you find your own heart aligning with God's heart? What are the things that help that?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a bit of trial and error and feeling some freedom to experiment a little bit and to, I think figuring out and understanding what God's will is and how God is glorified in our work is like it's just a process. And I
Mm,
think I feel more comfortable and confident in that having done it for a while. But I think as
mhm.
an early writer, I was like, well, I think this will bring God glory. And I think I'm going to get some joy out of it in the meantime. And so I'm just going to go for it,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes maybe writers feel like doing something for God's glory is kind of absent of our own like enjoyment.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think there we can kind of get confused about that. Like you talk a little bit, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but it's just the kind of the overlap that sometimes happens when we're writing about like wanting to get some like perks out of it, wanting to
Mm,
grow a platform or
mhm,
feeling like you mentioned earlier Google Analytics, like but sometimes Google Analytics like provides some feedback. You're like,
mhm,
is what I'm writing like resonating with people? And
mhm,
sometimes that can be a tool to kind
mhm.
of discern that, like when you're not really sure, like, is this something or so, So
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have to discern just by going out and doing it and seeing
Yeah.
like, do I enjoy this and do people benefit from it? And is this bringing God glory?
Yeah.
Hopefully the answer is yes.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I, yeah, to do all of that, to put things out there, but then to do it, I think, in a Christian community. So in the Word and in the Christian community, that's when we have high
Yeah.
school students leave and we send them off to college and church, and it's become a mantra. And I don't know why. We've had different people in that staff role over the years as a youth director or pastor, but and our charge is always the same to them that last Sunday in June when they're here, and they may stay through the summer and whatnot, but we just say, hey, stay in the Word, stay in a church. And I think those are similar things I'd encourage bloggers to do is
That's
stay
so
in the
good.
Word and stay in the church.
Yeah, it's simple, kind of,
Yeah.
right? Like we complicate things. So that's a good word. So yeah, why did you feel the need to write this book specifically? I mean, I think it takes a special person that has a heart for the craft of blogging today. I think it's kind of fallen on some hard times maybe. So
Yeah.
like where did that come from for you?
Um, that's a good question. What was the original? Um, I think if I could maybe just kind of backstory to the title, you mentioned the title, Blogging for God's Glory in a Clickbait World. The book was, I wouldn't call it floundering, but we struggled a little bit to, like, how do we organize the book? What are we actually doing? What are we writing about? We feel like we enjoy blogging. We feel like we're getting benefits of it. Is it going to be helpful to us to be writers out there in the world as, we think about aspirations someday, not to move beyond blogging, but what would it mean to write books and all those sorts of things? But when we added in a clickbait world, for us, that's when the book, I'll say, sort of came alive, in that
Mhm.
it gave us a sparring partner, and it felt like it brought it into, we could say something distinctly Christian that wasn't so ethereal and out there, but like,
Mm.
okay, the world we're in is chasing metrics that aren't always wrong by any means. I'm looking at Jana, and who's like the SEO expert, and I am embarrassed to say how little I know about that, but I could talk about that in a minute. But like, so it's not wrong, and it'd be good if I was better at it, but I just felt like that was the strong temptation. So, and I felt it in my heart. And when I talked with other bloggers and got to know them, and it felt like an opportunity to speak to both a struggle that is common, but then ways to maybe go forward, in spite of it, or not in spite of it, but like through it in a godly way. What is this path forward for us in a world that's, um, just it's hard, and you say, well, Google Analytics is helpful, right? Like, it tells me, oh, this felt like they were engaged here. Well, okay, that is helpful, but that's not like, uh, that doesn't always mean that was, I'm assuming for you, I'm sure you're writing good things and they were engaged, so great. But like, some people are like, oh yeah, lots of people read that and they should not have. That's what I'm thinking sometimes. Like, you wrote that, and yes, you filled it with all the charged fear mongering that would get lots of clicks, and so how do we cultivate a contentment in the Lord when, I'm asking as a question, but like, that was what the book was trying to, when it's easier to get contentment from clicks, and there's ways to go about them that are less than helpful and maybe even less than godly. So that's what we were wrestling with. That was kind of the origins of it. And maybe temperament engineer wise back, it was like, I'm not very good out of the box creativity thing, but like when we define, and I've just learned over the years as I do something, I'm like, oh, I've thought about that quite a bit, and so maybe I'd be able to help others. And so I think spending some years blogging, I was like, I think I might be able to just point a few people in some directions that would be helpful. And then probably seeing a lot of blogs that were bad. Like, I just, bless her heart, I was like, okay, I like you, but why does your blog look so bad? And I don't even mean God, like, you're writing good words, but like, why do you make it look so ugly?
Right.
And so I wanted to help people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we live in such a day where it's like anyone can be a publisher, anybody can be an influencer, and anybody can be insta famous like instantly. So,
Yeah.
um, I think the things that we're talking about, like, and we talk here in the writer's block, is just like it's a longer, harder road. Like you don't get the satisfaction necessarily of the clickbait of,
Mhm.
like the meteoric rise. It's
Mhm.
it's an often longer
Yeah.
slog. And I love you talked about that in your book. I shared this on the writer's block, and I'll read it again because it's just that good. You wrote, deep down, most Christian bloggers do want to write for God and His glory, for the sake of truth, for the sake of serving readers with our words. But I also know that for me, the mottos of art for God's sake and art for ego's sake slosh around in the same heart. And gosh, I love that. I love it because it resonates. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes back to my first question. It's like God's glory is like we want that, but
Mhm.
there's that slosh in our own hearts of like we want a little bit of the glory sometimes too. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about that, especially having, finished the book and kind
Yeah.
of been on the other side of living this out. What are your thoughts about
Yeah.
that?
So we got Tim Challies to write the forward, which was really nice. There was a joke I put on Instagram once where I did a mock cover of the book and I put our names really small and I put Tim Challies' name like really big on it to say, if people don't know, he's kind of Mr. Blogger.
Yeah.
Right. So, because I just want, it's like, oh, I want people to buy it. I want people to read it. I want people to know that Tim said something nice about me. And John, a little bit, but me,
Yeah.
I feel that. So yeah, I think naming it helps, to put it out there and say like this, to pretend it's not happening is not helpful. It's sort of like when Jesus speaks of like sin and the darkness, it can't like come, but and you don't want to bring it to light. But when you bring it to light, it's a little more helpful. You can deal with it, you can treat it, you can acknowledge it, you can confess it and repent of it and turn from it. And John Owen's old words, the Puritan, like you can mortify it. What's a Bible word, but like he wrote this book called The Mortification of Sin. And so I just think it's this journey will be on for a long time until glory, but it gets
Mhm.
better. That's what I mean, having written that now, I think it's 5 years. I don't remember, but sounds about, maybe it's just 4, maybe 5. I feel it can get better. That's maybe, I think of Paul's words to Timothy about the young pastor showing himself to the congregation as a model of, faith and love, and, let them see your progress is the line. And, again, like you can't do that in 5 minutes. Oh, I've improved. It look, 5 minutes have gone by. I've written 2 more blogs. You don't see that over time. But now 5 years later, I'm like, I think my wife would say I'm a little less anxious about what publisher is going to say about this or that. I hope. I mean, maybe I've just heard no enough or had enough published that both kind of, I don't care as much. But I hope, I'd love to believe the sloshing about is a little less volatile, a little less chaotic. I'm sure a situation can happen next week that will remind me how little progress I've made in the Lord. But I
Yeah.
but I do think in general, over a long haul of doing the craft faithfully under the Lord, that really does change us for the better. And so it can get better. That would be my encouragement
Yeah.
now, thinking about it a ways past.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean, I think, yeah, I think that's it's part of our sanctification, and we're growing in, you know, in likeness of Christ as we keep doing it, and
Yeah.
hopefully some of that rubs off, right? And so
Yeah.
we
It does. Well, we
we
have the promise that it does. Yeah.
yeah,
In Christ it does.
yeah, yeah. Still a struggle, still something we butt up against often in our own work. But yeah, it's good. It's always good to hear other people give words to it, I think too.
Yeah.
It's always like, oh yeah, he kind of articulated what's sloshing in my heart. Like that's a
Yeah.
good word for it. And so
Mhm.
it feels good when other people give word to it. And like you said, it brings it out of the darkness. And
Mm.
so we can relate on that for sure.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I wanted to talk to you. You said when you kind of landed on the title of the clickbait world, like that was kind of when your whole thesis of your book kind of came into line, and I think we all understand what clickbait is. So, like as bloggers, I think so much of this relates to the craft too of getting better at crafting words, but what are your thoughts about like how bloggers can get better
Mm.
at
Mm.
getting eyes on your
Mhm.
work? Like you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier just about the visual appeal, sometimes
Yeah.
that can be so off-putting that we don't
Mhm.
necessarily give somebody's words a chance.
Right.
But even in our choice of words, and how to not be clickbaity but
Mhm.
also be really intentional about getting people to be interested in your work and
Mhm.
your craft. So do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, probably a lot, but I think that's the second half of blogging for God's glory. I think it means making best use of all the tools that would be available to us to serve readers. I can, just you think of that metaphor of serving or whatever, but like, um, there's a way for a waiter or waitress to bring food that's helpful and not have like, well, hey, it's at the counter, go get it. Like, there's metaphors for that for writing. Like you want to bring things to people as well as you can in a way that would serve them best. And so, yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. And I think there's kind of a technical side. And so probably many people who are using WordPress should just move to a template that's like simple and easy and like
Mm,
pulls them over to a template where they can do something clean and crisp and clear and like just mess with the words because they're not going to download the latest plugin or whatever widget to optimize their website to be the best. What they're going to end up with is something clunky and hard to use, and frankly that would be me. I'm not picking on that. I as I poked into Word and I realize it can do more. In some ways there are things it can do more. Like I've got an iPhone sitting here. Like I know this can do a lot more than I can do with it, but I just want to do the few simple things really well. And so some people I think would be helped there. I think encouraging people to hire out or recruit friends that can help them do things that maybe they can't. And so maybe self-editing. I mean, I think there's a spiritual metaphor with how much you can self-edit, of how much you can see of your own fault. But
yeah.
to some degree, some people are better at than others, but others might need to pursue others to just say, okay, readers are distracted by the typos. We need to get some of these out of here so they can really hear the words you have to say, whether maybe you're addressing a non-Christian audience and like, okay, you can't talk about Jesus and just misspell words or what, it just
Yeah.
doesn't communicate well the excellency of Christ to the other part of blogging for his glory means doing it well. So maybe it's that, maybe it would be the website design, maybe it would be pursuing SEO, the search engine optimization more than I did, or am able to. But so those are a few things, but I think the aesthetic ones in our world, we're just right or wrong. We're driven by what looks nice, and so I think some of that is helpful. It's not wrong. I'm drawn to
Yeah.
Christianity Today just rebranded. Maybe it's 7 months old now or something, but this summer, their website, and it's like, man, that website and print magazines. I'm like, they did that for a reason, to really appeal to people from a visual. And there's a reason. Like when we get a magazine, it doesn't just have walls of words, like no pictures, no nothing, no like they're aesthetically designed. And I don't think it's just because we're sinful. I think it's because being made in God's image. You go back to the garden there to work and care for and cultivate and have dominion. And so it sounds a little aggressive, but like our little internet real estate that is our name.com or .wordpress or whatever, like that's our place to have dominion and to cultivate and make it better. So I guess I don't have all the ways. Maybe that's what a book would be for, or enroll in your course and learn how to do it better. But I would just probably give the encouragement that like it's not wasted time to spend that making your words sound good and work good and all that.
Yeah. I love that too, because I think too the whole idea of truth, goodness, and beauty,
Yeah,
like
there you
sometimes
go.
we don't even really realize that we've experienced that, but we just come away with some from reading something and you're just like, ah, like, but there's a lot of work that went into
Yeah,
crafting the article and making the website a beautiful
yeah.
experience, or having some white space for your brain to like
Mhm.
absorb. um it just made me think of, I don't know if you've seen the most recent Nate Bargatze special on
Your friend Nate
HBO,
Bargatze. Yeah, it's great.
or what, it not HBO, that's like dating me, and Netflix. That
Netflix,
totally
sure.
dated me. But he was just talking about how, like, words, he's just like, put in some blank spaces in there, forgive me, let me come up for air.
There's just the
Really funny.
most or whatever. Yeah, he's great. Yeah, that's a good skit.
Anyway, it's fun to see some of those things, but to like have an eye for that and to see that as part of, like, this is like all put together as a package to your reader as like a
Yeah.
gift. Like, this is a loved gift.
Eh,
I
eh,
want, and of course, that's a gift to the Lord as well,
mm,
to make it easier for somebody to digest.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I just think maybe I could just encourage writers to keep those two things together. I think there's kind of the pietistic spiritual crowd that would like, well, it's glorifying to the Lord if it's done from a heart that loves him. And that's true. But then there's kind of not thought about how it looks or how it reaches readers or so on and so forth, or whether it's done well or sloppy or it's misusing the semicolon and like at that level. And then there's those that are just so focused on that like, hey, if this doesn't look like Christianity Today's website, never mind the fact that it's a staff of 100, then I can't, it's beneath me to even write. Like that's not true either.
Right.
Um, So I don't know. That was maybe our contribution. I felt like the book was to try and keep both of those together when they're ordinarily, or often, I shouldn't say ordinarily, often separated.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a balance there to be struck for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was poking around on your website, looking at your
Mhm.
blogging, and it looks like you're doing a lot of writing. Like, what does that look like for you today? I think a lot of writers kind of wonder, like, do I just blog forever in order to get a book? You're writing
Mhm.
some books and probably doing some blogging on the side. Like, what does that look like for you? Where are your priorities in terms of where you put your words these days?
Yeah. Um, well, I wish I was putting them more places than they are. Probably that's how a lot of writers feel. But I've had to. I feel like it taunts me that I wrote a book called "Blogging for God's Glory," and then shortly thereafter stopped blogging as much as I did. So I don't like to name that. That's sort of what happened. But a few things outside of that happened. One, my kids went from the ages they were to now like three in varsity sports. I ended up coaching a few. I joined the school board. We planted a church. And I signed my first real book contract, even though I've self-published some books and worked with a small publisher. So all those sort of happened, not over 5 minutes or even 5 months, but like over the last 5 years. And so I've had to, or not had to, but I've blogged less. Even I've had to reduce the number of articles I try to guest post other places if they'll take them and pitch people. So I'm trying to believe the part of my book that says like, under the Lord is he sees and he knows even when you're not seen and known. And I'm not that I'm seen and known ever either or was or going to be someday, but like a lot of my writing is existing. No one's going to see it for a year and a half or 2 years. The book's going to come out in the summer of 26. And
Mm.
I started writing that book proposal in the winter of 19. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's such a long thing.
Yeah.
And and in May of last year, I got the yes, and so it was great. But that meant I've shifted things. The reading, the writing has been towards that, and I've had to scale other things back accordingly. So you're asked a very simple question. I'm sorry I made it such a long meandering one.
No,
What,
it's fascinating to hear your story.
yeah, but I've had to. So I'm blogging less and I'm writing guest posts less. I hope to return to that. I don't have another proposal I'm immediately ready to write, but um so I'm thinking about how and when to change that. But right now it just looks like squirreling away words into a Word document. It's now reached the right size. And so I need to take the next 3 months to like make them the right words. So I'll just throw out a number. I'm on the hook for 40 or 45,000 words to turn that in. I think I've got a manuscript that's 50 in it. But about 20 of them are not good. So I've got to get rid of 5,000 and make the other 15 that are not good.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna figure that out. So what I'm
Oh,
doing
good for
is,
you.
thank you. Yeah, just Wednesdays I don't work in the office, so it's a weird day for a pastor to be off, but that's my off day. There's other things that make sense. So I spend a lot of time just working on it then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of writers, I think, just want to keep blogging and like that's fine and wonderful. I
Yeah.
think too, a lot of us kind of feel like a stepping stone, so to speak, of like moving towards publication. And I know that's been my journey a little bit as well too. And so I'm trying to learn how to balance that personally. Like, how do I
Mhm.
keep this thing moving while also investing words? And
Well, okay, let me ask this. How do you do it with the podcast? Like, because then you add these streams of things that are like writing but not quite writing, but they're
yeah.
helpful and in platform. Yeah, I imagine you're just wrestling with all that. They
Yeah,
all
I
take
mean,
time.
I have some help, and some of my helpers are here on this call that help me, and like repurposing things helps.
Mm,
I think too, like I could make my podcast a whole lot better, and I could put a whole lot more editing time into it and things like that. I just don't have the
mhm,
time. So it's kind of good enough at some level and not as
yeah,
like perfect as I would like it to be. So
mhm,
I'm kind of learning to be okay with letting go of some of that. Um, but yeah, it's finding help.
good.
But also figuring out like what does the new normal look like? Because I love the art of blogging and I love It's very satisfying to feel like, especially like when you're talking about writing a manuscript, you're investing in the future. A blog is like, oh, I could put one out in a few days, and
Yeah.
that's kind of like an instant gratification. So
Mhm.
there, it's a different thing.
Yeah. I mean, every time over the last, I'm just probably once a month now. And that's what I shoot for. And I probably hit 10 blog posts. It's terrible blogging. Some people do that in a month. But I'm like, oh, I still like this. I did. Marilyn Robinson wrote a long book on Genesis. And I wrote a ridiculously long review of it just because it was fun to me. I had like a few people read it, and that's probably it. Because I even flagged it, like when I emailed people, I was like, I don't know who's here for 3,000 words about Marilyn Robinson in the book of Genesis, but if you're here for that, like, this is what this is. And so, yeah. So
Yeah.
I still like
Yeah,
it.
because it's fun to you. Like
Yeah.
that's something that you find joy from. So that's a reason enough to keep going, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Tim Challies earlier. He's kind of the king of blogging. I think last I checked, it's like 20 years, right?
Oh,
25 years of
so amazing.
every day. And I know he's addressed this topic before about blogging is dead, and you did it a
Mm.
little in your book too. But what are your thoughts about that? Do you feel like that's still I mean, we talked about the personal reasons for continuing on. Do you think it's a
Mhm.
good professional step for writers?
Oh, well, I mean, you might do better at getting it. It depends what that a step to what, I mean, I guess, right? But if it's a book, maybe an acquisitions editor for Moody would be better to answer that. I don't, I still think so. I think it legitimizes you as someone who's already out there doing things, even if it's small. I was hearing more feedback a couple years ago about, like, we need X number of subscribers, and that's the golden ticket to get the book contract. My opinion, and again, I'm not an acquisitions editor for a big publisher or any publisher, but I don't think that's as true. But I do think the existence of a blog, especially a quality one, coupled with guest posts at different places, still is really helpful. It communicates some sort of audience and some sort of, um, it's a little bit like the missionary who's like, I want to go overseas to China, tell people about Jesus. I'm like, well, tell me 5 people you're telling Jesus to in your neighborhood, and you're like, I don't have anybody.
Oh,
Like,
that's
well,
good.
you want
Yeah.
to write a book for me? But you don't love writing enough to just do it.
Yeah.
So I think and, that sounded more adversarial than I meant it to, but like I think there's a goodness still to blogging, even as professionally. It legitimizes you. It gives a practice for me. It really gave for the 10 years I've been doing it, gave a practice that I know I needed. Again, my context coming out of engineering, I was like, I just needed time with words and to get better. I felt like Nate Bargatze. These are the most words, like his joke, like, why are books have so many words? So I needed that, but I think it's good. So when people say dead, it is different. I just wouldn't use the word dead. I remember writing for the Gospel Coalition. It sounds like I write from old timers. I'm special, but like, I've done it enough, and I've done it in the past. And like, there would be, the thing you hope for. They read the article, and you get to the bottom, and you see your bio, and then there's a link to your website, and then they go to that link to the website, and then they subscribe to your blog. Like, that's a sequence of events, but you do hope for it, and you want it. And I don't think it's wrong to want for it, and to build your website so that you can receive those well and get some readers and serve those readers and so on and so forth. But I would say that just it doesn't happen near like it used to. So when I say it's not dead, but it is different. I write for places not expecting to get a single subscriber out of it now,
Mm,
which is strange. The joy of doing it, and really some of the best, when you find a publication that edits you well, that's one of the best gifts you get from that publication, to be honest. Just to, like, well, that doesn't feel like traffic. It's not website traffic back to you, and it's not a thing, but you got edited by real editors. Like, that's the real gift. But
that's such a learning experience. Yeah.
so I'm just rambling, but I think it is different. It's not the same as it was. Even the Gospel Coalition, like, they're going to take your article and put it in a Twitter long thing, because they pay for the subscription, and they can put it all there. They don't have the character limit, but you're not going to get a link back to your website. You're not going to.
Mm,
It is dead from the stepping stone to, like, going big and wide with as a blogger. I think that's hard. To
yeah.
be another Tim Challies it's just going to be really hard.
Yeah.
unless you're famous from some other venue, then parlay it into blogging. So like Matthew McConaughey, I don't know if you just anybody knows this. He had the book Green Lights. It's terrible and goofy and funny and it's wild. It's who he is, the actor. But anyway, he just launched a 5-minute blog subscription that he puts out Fridays at 5 o'clock, and you can sign up for it. I'm not advocating anybody should. You're not going to get deep Christian thought on it. But it was interesting to me. Like it will go. I mean, it will just take off because he's somebody already.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I do think probably if you're already a somebody, whatever that would mean, maybe your blogging would take off. But it's just going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the struggle that I think a lot of us feel is like that desire to build a platform means that you are able to reach more people. And it does seem harder, like what you were just describing. Like there was a heyday
Yeah.
of a blogging that has kind of passed. And yet for all the reasons you just said, it's still a good practice, especially if you're wanting the practice and you're getting better at the craft and you're serving people.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's a slog.
Yeah. 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 Mm.
Well, with that and just kind of the way things have evolved and how things are changing, what would you say to a Christian writer who's just starting out, like
Mm.
knowing that blogging is hard and it's good for all the reasons we've mentioned, but what would you say to them?
Hmm. Uh, hmm. It's worth, if you love it and you enjoy it, and you feel like you have some things that you could help teach and pastor. I'll use the word pastor just generic, like just encourage people to follow the Lord, and they should do it, and not be too worried. If I think it is true still that professionally, like it would help you to have, a person to have it. So it'd be good to have it. And, um, but to not see it might be a stepping stone, but probably not in the old ways it used to be. It'll legitimize you as a writer. It'll help you, grow in your craft, to get feedback, to have an audience that small as it might be, which is mine is, give feedback and appreciate you, both the challenge, but also the encouragement. Oh, that people did like that. Thank you. And so I think people should do it. So what practically, I think you write 5 blog posts that don't publish them and just see how you did. Probably less helpful to do all the work to build a Squarespace template and then write 2 blog posts and it just fizzles. And, I, under the Lord, it's not, there's no such thing as a waste, I suppose, but probably feels a little bit like a waste of time. So I just say start writing, filling Word docs, and then collect a list of 20 topics about blogs. If you had time, then you'd write those. And if you write 5 blog posts that you never published, then maybe you should find a way to go publish them and start small. Invite your friends to look at and then start with an email list like that. Building an email list would be too, like, I think that's also in the publishers would say that. And I think it is true that social media doesn't sell books, but email lists do.
Yeah.
Is cold and impersonal as the MailChimp thing is, or Substack or whatever. Substack's a little better. It feels like it's coming from a person.
Yeah.
Uh, it's still, those sell books in ways and make connections to audiences in ways that social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that doesn't really do it. So I'd say just start emailing friends. Hey, I'm writing this blog. Hey, would you ever want to get these when they come out? And just email the 50 people and start there. And you got a list. See if you can get 30 of them on a list.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's not glamorous work, but it's good and it's rewarding work if you keep it up and keep going. So yeah, I
Yeah.
just this morning I opened my inbox to somebody who had found my writing off of a YouVersion plan that I had posted,
Oh,
and it was just such a sweet thing, and I was like, wow, it was such a great way to start my day, and to have somebody reach out to me and take the time to reply, and it was so encouraging to me because I think sometimes we feel like we're in our own little silos as writers, and you never
yeah.
know what resonates with people. And so every once in a while, you get a little
Yeah.
glimpse of that, and it feels real good.
Yeah. That's the kindness of the Lord. Just, yeah,
Yeah.
reminding you this mattered. I see. I know. And
Yeah, and your
yeah,
words go out and bless
yeah.
people.
Hmm.
Well, thank you to all my friends who came
Yeah.
today to hear our conversation. I'd love for you all to unmute if you have any questions or comments and fire away or type them in the chat. Or maybe we just answered every single question.
I probably.
I just want to comment, Benjamin, that I read the book, read your book just fairly recently, a few months ago, and just really enjoyed it. I felt like, okay, he understands, where us little first-time bloggers are, learning and struggling and growing. And there was so much good encouragement in that book. I love this quote. Actually, you quoted Tony Reinke. Is that how you
Yeah,
say his
Tony,
last
I
name?
think so.
And he said, don't be intimidated by all the books. Everybody is publishing, it seems. But we have this promise from the Lord in Habakkuk. It says, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Just think about that. Think about that overwhelming tsunami of the knowledge of God. We are far from the saturation point. There's so much work to be done. And that was
Mm,
super encouraging, because sometimes you do feel like this has already been said.
yeah.
What am I adding to the conversation? But when we're speaking about the Lord, it will never, it's an endless supply, right? And so
Mm.
I appreciated you sharing that quote. That was really encouraging.
Oh, thank you. Can I give a little backstory to that a little bit? Is that all right? Can I?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So a funny, I mean, it ties together all these themes. So I think that quote from Tony is on a podcast with Jeff Metters, J.A. Metters, called Home Row. And which he doesn't do anymore. I think a lot of people loved it. I told him that. And he's like, every time I see people, they tell me to bring it back and they hate me for stopping it. But and I'm on my bike, a stationary bike in the basement, listening to that in headphones. And I'm thinking to myself, because his first guests were like Tony Reinke and Jared Wilson. I'm like, who is this Metters guy who's getting these big names on his blog? So to talk about the sloshing around in the heart of like, oh yeah, Tony, that's a great quote. Yeah. The knowledge of the sea, the waters, let the glory of God everywhere. Yeah, that's great. There's more work to do. I'm encouraged. And all of a sudden, I'm like jealous. Why, why does this guy get to interview Tony Reinke? And so I remember that moment distinctively. And so that quote's been a favorite one from mine, not of mine, but like a favorite quote from Tony about that theme, because I think it really does encourage me that there's just more to be done. And to encourage you guys, like I would say, people think about TGC, or sometimes we talk about pastoring. Like most of our church isn't reading those. What they're reading is, if you wrote something and to the people in your church that blessed them and challenged them, encouraged them, and talked about the Bible or the end time, uh, whatever you think about God's sovereignty and human responsibility, like those are like issues that if you wrote about them, or what it means to be a godly, whatever your profession or career, or some of you might be mothers or single, to be widowed, all of that, if you wrote about that, there's people that would read that with a gravity that they never will, even if Jen Wilkin or Beth Moore or whatever, fill in your favorite big author, whoever that would be, and you have way more influence than they do in fulfilling that vision in Habakkuk of the water covering the sea and people's hearts of the glory of God. So anyway, I feel like I'm preaching at you. I don't mean to do that. Thank you for highlighting that quote.
No, that's so good, because I think that addresses the whole like the market is so saturated, I shouldn't even try, right? Because I think we
No,
we kind of feel that way, like, well, everything has already been said, but that's a great reminder that
no,
no, it's
no,
not been said from your point of view. So
mm-mm, no. Other things people want to
yeah,
ask?
any other thoughts? Carrie. Carrie usually comes through with a good question.
Oh, I have so many.
Oh,
See, I know.
All I keep thinking is, I'm trying. I blog pretty regularly, but getting my website together has just, I keep thinking, I've got it situated, and then it doesn't happen. And anyway, it's just, but one of the things that I've kind of equated it with is there's a couple things. Sometimes I think the Lord's using this time to prepare me. And that's why I haven't been able to really get it to take off and do what I think it should do. And so I'm trying to be patient with myself as well. But I also don't want the messiness of it or whatever to be a distraction from the message. And so it's a struggle I have. It's something I was praying about this morning. So I don't even know the questions to ask.
Well, I'll just affirm that I feel the same thing. So and you have to put things in the right order, or guess at the right order, you know, who can know the right order to do things. But like, for me, it's finish the manuscript. And I know I'm tired of paying for the MailChimp's like monthly subscriber thing. Like, but and they keep raising the rates, and I'm like, I got to fix that. And my website is kind of dated because when I blog more, and it's not reflective of quite where I am today. My author pictures, not what it was. It was from a wedding I officiated like 5 years ago, and I got to fix that. And I'm like, but I got to finish. The most pressing deadline is the book one. And so, so I'm just trying to do, like, here I am, you know, here we are in Matthew 6, sufficient for the day is the troubles thereof. I don't know why I quote King James. I think about that quote, but right. It's just one thing at a time, the Lord knows. And the secret things, like that's the phrase, right? The Lord says he sees in secret, and you were praying this morning, thinking about it this morning. Yeah. So I don't have an answer for you. I just encourage you, Carrie. That's where a lot of us live, is unsatisfied with the metrics, unsatisfied with the presentation, and longing for more. And I think that can be a godly ambition. And it's not right. Fan at the flame.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
I like the idea too that a blog post is really maybe I don't want to say a sacrificial offering, but an offering to God, as well as to, you know, where he's using you to offer to other people. And if only one person sees it and it's my mom, well, okay, you know, she'll probably tell somebody else about it, or it'll impact her in a way that maybe she hadn't thought about before. So I think sometimes we do get caught up in what the results should be, and to the point where, like, Cheryl, you know, those of us that have struggled with perfectionism, you don't put anything out there at all. And, you know, so things are left unsaid. You can, you know, even things said a little awkwardly can have an impact on people.
Yeah.
You just press publish.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Yeah.
And you can always share it with the writer's block, right? Which Kathy does, which is always good. So it's never just your mom.
Appreciate it.
Well, Jonathan, or Ben, why do I'm sorry. That's the second time. Benjamin, thank you so much for being here and just being a kindred spirit with us. We really appreciate your time and the work that you've done. And where can we keep up and follow what you're doing and the release of your new book and all of those things?
Yeah. Well, my kind of silly but also serious answer is usually 9 o'clock and 10:45 on Sundays in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, if you're in the area.
I'm 50% of the time I'm preaching, and the rest someone else is. So, just my last, it's hard to say and spell, but BenjaminVrbicek.com or fanandflame.com will redirect there. That was kind of the metaphor I was encouraged by of Paul telling Timothy to fan and to flame a gift, and just do it. Whatever you have to do, keep this thing alive. You know, this fire. So anyway, that fanandflame.com will get there. So book things. I'll just I wish I would have brought it in here to hold it up, but Gospel-Centered Discipleship is releasing a book in late January, which is now not very far away. I don't know when this will come out. So, called Broken but Beautiful: Reflections on the Blessings of the Local Church. And so while I've been a managing editor there, we collected kind of some of our favorite blog posts about the local church, essays, maybe, hopefully, and just a love letter to the church for all the brokenness. It's still doing wonderful things in the world, and it's God's plan to bless people. And so we have 21 entries in there. And so I was the managing editor, wrote a preface. And so that'll come out in a week or two. So if anybody wants to pick that up, I think it will bless you, encourage you. You might know. We're going to put it in our church welcome bags. You know, it's easier to do because it has my name on it. Like, that helps. But like, but I can do that easily. And I'm charge of this church in some ways with the other elders. So I can make, hey, let's give Paul Tripp a break here and put something else in there. But I think it would just bless people who maybe have even experienced hurt in the church. So I'm thankful for that. The other one is, if you want to scour Baker's website till the summer of 2026, that hopefully a book on the return of Christ and how that brings hope to those who are suffering. So that's what I've been working on for a long time and thinking a lot about. I think the end times focus of the return of Christ is relegated to either kind of weird theology, or we don't really think about it much because we're already prosperous or whatever. But I think suffering brings an earnest interest in what the end will be. And I think it's a bright future. And so I'm trying to write about that.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for that, for sure. That's one of my favorite topics. So looking forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you so much for having me on. I do feel like I'm talking to kindred spirits. So thanks for
Well,
humor.
yeah, art and heart of writing is what we're about here. So I think we align real well with what you're doing. So
Okay.
yeah, so thank you so much. And we will put links to all of those things that you mentioned in our show notes when this is published. So thank you so much, Benjamin, for being here.
Okay. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.